Okay, now I'd like to start the main body of the show. I assume Mr. Spady is on. There
He
he is,
sure is.
the legend himself. We're
Gotta
really,
stop.
really pleased that you're on, and welcome to New Tracks. And
Thank you, sir.
I'll before we start, just a quick couple of questions, softball questions. When did you start model railroading?
Well, not unlike the kids on the show, I started young. Um, my parents were kind enough to buy me a Sears HO layout that I put together and put on a piece of plywood and played with trains as probably when I was about 8 or 9 years old. Did that for a while, and I've been modeling my whole life. I got into model cars, model planes, and about 20 years ago, I got back into model railroading. That was after girls and kids and divorce and all kinds of good things in my life. So, I'm back into it. I just little. I don't know if you want to hear about me or not, Tom. What I do,
Yeah, a
what
little
I've
bit.
been doing.
Yeah.
Up to you. So I am really a modular railroader. In fact, on the screen behind me is one of the modules that I built. Um, but started that in about 2012, I guess, something like that. Belonged to a local group here for a long time. Unfortunately, I'm not playing in that sandbox anymore, primarily because I got involved with Sean in building this layout, which took up basically all my time. So I'm an ON30 modular railroader. My focus is scenery, weathering, things like that. Not so much operations, although I love running trains and doing operations. That's not my primary focus. I'm not really an empire builder. I'm more of a detail guy. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, I'm also an architect. I happen to be the paymaster for our Pacific Southwest region NMRA division here in Los Angeles. I also edit the region's dispatch newsletter and do a lot of things in that organization.
Maybe, I don't know if it's part of your presentation. If it is, we'll start the presentation. But how'd you get hooked up with Sean Williams and this project?
I'll go into that as part of the presentation. I'll start that off. If you want me to start, I can start now.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll follow with some questions with our Zoom people.
Sure, you got it. Let me see here. Let's do this. And I'll do this. Oops, let's sort this out. So hopefully you can see
Yes, everything.
the first slide in the screen.
Yep. Excellent.
Super. All right. So how did I get connected up with Sean? As I said, I am still a modular railroader. We were at a large layout event for the GTS show in Costa Mesa one year, and this young man walked up to me as I was running trains around a layout that was probably 40 by 40. And we started into a conversation, and he said, well, can I run a train? And I said, sure. I handed him the controller, and for about 2.5 hours, he ran my trains for me, which was really exciting to watch him. He was so engaged, so detail oriented. Sean's about 32 years old now, I guess. So when I first met him, he was in his late 20s. Um, he's always wanted a layout. And as we got to know each other for his whole life since he was a kid, and as we got to know each other better, one day he came up to me and he just said, I really want to build a layout. Would you be willing to help me? He was really excited about the work I had been doing and liked what he saw. And I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. Let me help you. I had no idea what I was getting into. We spent about 3 years working on this rather small layout. This is a 5 by 10 layout. and working basically 1 or 2 days a week, or working at home, building things and then bringing them to the layout and fitting them in. So about 3,000 hours, and 3 years later, we came up with what you're going to see here today. This presentation was really a how-to presentation, or is really a how-to presentation. So I'm going to talk about how we developed the ideas, where the ideas came from, kind of some of the techniques we used, and so on. So everything from the initial design through kind of the final detailing. And although we call the layout done, it's never done. I'm still painting figures and putting details on the layout. It's a giant sponge for details. So like I said, these are some of the design criteria. This was Sean's dream, and I've tried to help him build his dream. It's a Pacific Northwest themed layout. It's all about, evergreens and the deciduous forests of the Pacific Northwest. The layout is designed around an Ian Rice track plan. That's Ian down in the lower right corner. It's a Lilliput Loggers is the name of the layout, or name of the track plan. And as far as we knew, we didn't think it had ever been built. And unfortunately, although Sean wanted Ian to see it, Ian passed away about a year before we were done. It's portable layout, even though it's 5x10. It is, so it had to be lightweight, it had to be portable. Sean wanted it in his garage, so it had to be liftable. It actually is stored above one of his vehicles in his garage, and I'll show you more about that later. We wanted all the buildings to be lighted, and Sean very much wanted this to be at a level of excellence that allowed the layout to be published. And it actually was published this year in the ON30 annual. So if you get a copy of that, you can check it out in probably more detail. But this is the track plan. Like I said, it's a 5x10 layout. We stretched. It starts out as a 4x8 layout in Ian's plan, and we stretched it out to 5x10 just to get ON30 to work with the track radii and so on. So you can see it's got several industries, a sawmill. It's got a wharf and a interface with the ocean. It's got the engine facilities. It's got a mine. Let me get rid of this. Sorry. It's got the Silverjack mine, and there's a logging camp area up in this area. The logging camp here, and then a log loading area up here. So very much centered around the industries of the Pacific Northwest. It has a continuous loop. So if we just want to drink beer and run trains around in a circle, we can do that. But the other portion of the layout is a point-to-point, where from the mill up around this way, I assume you guys can see my cursor, tell me if you can't, up around this way up to the log landing, and then back down is another operational characteristic. We figured that probably you could actually have 3 independent operators running on this layout simultaneously, one doing the logging run, one doing the mine run, and another switching down next to the wharf. So here's the technical stuff. I've said a lot of this already, but it is ON30. So it's O-scale narrow gauge, probably set in the, I'm going to say the 20s, 30s, maybe early 40s if you stretch it. It's 5x10. Primary industries are logging, mining, and the port. There's 12 structures on the layout. All of them are lighted. It's Pico Code 100 track. We talked about doing hand laid track, but given the nature of it being portable, we were a little worried about the delicacy of hand laid track, and decided to go with Pico, which I use on my modules and I really like. All the switches are manual switches with frog juicers, and we use the NCE control system. So here's the base construction. It is 1x4 pine interlaced frame, glued and screwed together. It's extremely rigid and has held up really well to portability as we move it to different locations to show. We use 2-inch foam, XPS foam, which is extruded polystyrene foam. For those of you on the East Coast, you probably see this everywhere. In California, it's really hard to find. We just don't insulate with this product. So when you can find a 2-inch 4x8 sheet of this stuff, you buy it because it's not easy to get. This is how the layout is stored. Sean's kind of a technical genius. I'm the artistic guy, and he's more the technical guy in our team. He rigged up a lift system with the 4 points, 2 on each side of the layout, rising up to a common pulley that goes over to a winch on the wall over here that raises and lowers the layout. This is a manual winch. He's since changed it out to a Harbor Freight power winch that lifts this thing up in about 3 seconds. It's really pretty nice arrangement. The layout itself is built on, you saw the frame, but it's also supported on pretty strong and durable supports. The supports are actually for a high strength portable table, and we've rigged up the base of the table to receive these 1x3s that have 4-inch casters on them. One person can roll this around on a flat surface with no problem. Literally, I can move this around with one hand. Makes it very easy to bring it in and out at shows and whatnot. And I'll show you a little later how we do that. That's just a detailed view here of ultimately how the support connectors and the safety chain that we have on this are installed. So one thing that we did, we took Ian's plan and we went to, I don't know, I forget the guy's name. He does backdrops, and I apologize for not remembering his name, Joey Ricard. We went to Joey Ricard and asked him to print out the layout at 5x10 after we had mocked it up with a 1-foot grid. And he printed this out. And one thing that it made it extremely easy for us to understand how the track was going to go, where it was going to go. We printed out full-scale Xeroxes of all the switches, so you can see them laid on the track plan here, and we got a very good idea how switch transitions were going to work, where things would be, how things would line up, how well they would line up, and we did have to ultimately make some very minor adjustments, but it made a very effective tool for building on as we started to implement the track. And Tom, keep me posted on time because I can tend to ramble on.
No, you're good. Yep.
So I want to go a little bit into the track installation. Like I said, we use the printed out base to lay out our track. We took a Ponce wheel and we went through the track plan and pounced that onto the foam, and then took a black marker and laid out the center line of the track on the entire layout. And then we started to build the vertical transitions, because one thing we were extremely worried about on this layout was because it really started as an HO layout, you can blow it up horizontally, but then you also have to look at the vertical, because there's a lot of tunnels on this layout. There's 2 tunnels here. There's 2 tunnels in the back on the back side of the layout. Um, and so we took our tallest locomotive and looked at, do we have the clearances? And I think on our, not this locomotive, but the tallest one, we had about 3/8 of an inch of clearance under this overpass. And so it worked out. We used Woodland Scenic's riser system to get us up to the logging area. And one thing I don't like about, I like the system. One thing I don't like about it is it's not terribly stable when it's just glued down. And so we used expanding foam in all the interstitial cracks in the riser system to really rigidify and stabilize it and really make sure it wasn't going to go anywhere or come loose at any point in time in the future of the layout. This layout has a view block down the center, which I really like because it almost gives you two completely separate, I'll call them scenes. So, going around the layout, you go from the ocean side, which is this side of the layout, to the mountain side, which is this side of the layout. And you really don't see one side to the other. This is right about at my eye level, the top of which is about 5'8" or something. So you really don't see over to the other side. You really have no idea what's going on the other side of the layout. We also had Joey Ricard print up backdrops for us, which are attached to the Masonite layout, or Masonite backdrop, excuse me. And here you can start to see some of the tunnels. We got a tunnel here, we got a tunnel here, and we have two tunnels kind of stacked on top of each other at this end. And so this is, building things up. This is really a view as we had started to play around with foam and look at, the landscape and what it was going to look like, how it was going to feel. Where did we feel like we had something reasonable going on? We did a lot of change to the actual not a lot of change. We did some change as we built this thing up, and you realize, I don't really like that, or I want to do something different. You'll see here, we had built out right to the edge. The original intent was to have a waterfront edge right along here. And you'll see in this scene, we've carved that away, and we're going to put one of the sidings down at the port on piers. So that was something. We looked also at this portion of the layout, and originally we had a mine kind of buried in the mountainside and coming out to the mine tipple. And that changed as well. You see that a little later on. Some of the challenges we had was really getting the radii on the, transitioning from HO to ON30, getting the radii to really work completely well at all locations. This is one spot where we really had some difficulties. You're coming out of a switch, going into a 19-inch radius curve and into a tunnel. And we ended up really fighting with this one and ultimately ended up really super elevating it because it took that amount of tweaking. I think we super elevated it about 3/16 of an inch in order to get the trains to the locomotives and the cars to trek properly. That's about a 2.5% grade right out of the switch to get us up and onto this part of the layout. So that's kind of how the layout was organized. A little bit about the terrain development. I used Joel Bragdon's rock mold system a lot when I was doing my modular stuff, primarily because it's very light. It's a resin-based system that you drop his system into molds. And literally each one of these rock molds, if it were plaster, would weigh 1/2 pound. And these weigh literally just 2 ounces, 3 ounces. It's extremely light. very good detail. And I really like the system. It is a bit technically complex. It's a 3/4 part process where you take your latex mold, you put in mold release, then you spray white latex or white lacquer into the mold, and you can see over here what that looks like. You then come in and put a resin surface onto that lacquer. Once that starts to set and gets a little bit gelled, then you pour in a 2-part expanding foam product on top of that. It's all about timing on this thing. And at a certain point in time where this stuff all starts to gel, you can take the mold and, slap it into position where you want it. And it's still flexible. You can mold it to whatever kind of shape you want. And it'll set in about 5 minutes, and you've got a rock hard mold to work with. And I will tell you this, this is probably one of the best tools we ever got for damaging our layout. It makes it extremely simple to just cut into, resin mold, resin rock molds. All of our foam shaping was really done with this oscillating saw. And if you don't have one, I'd certainly recommend that you get one. We did a lot of just ultracal or hydrocal, excuse me, not ultracal, hydrocal transitions between the rock molds. And you'll see how they turned out a little bit later. But, I have no compulsion about chopping up rock molds and fitting them to, whatever I think things should look like. And this is kind of where you end up. The Bragdon process, another layer to the Bragdon process is that he recommends that you gesso all the molds so that any stains or paints really soak into that gesso surface and, give you some retention. Otherwise, you're trying to stain or paint a lacquer surface, and it really doesn't absorb materials very well. So we just gessoed everything that wasn't going to be covered up or was a building or structure. We gessoed, and that's for consistency. So as I am going through and staining the gesso surface, you get consistency and color across the entirety of the rock terrain. And although it's a little bit hard to see here, well, let me start off with this. The first step here is just taking dry tempera, and that's like kids, color paints in school. Take dry tempera, you brush down the entire surface, and then you sponge it off, and that leaves the tempera paint embedded in all the cavities and cracks and shadows, and gives you really nice deep shadow colors. And then I go back over that surface with several washes. So I'll start with a gray wash, and you can start to see there's a little bit of rust tone in here. I use 2 or 3 different colors, and I just literally, I don't know if I have a picture of it here. If I don't, I take a tray, and I have gray and black and rust and tan, and I just dip the brush in that very lightly. Dip the brush then into literally a tub of water and just wash that over the surface, and it gives you some really nice variation in the color of the rock. And we were shooting for kind of that dark basalt rock that's pretty evident all around the Pacific Northwest. And also you can see here where we knew we were going to have some kind of ground terrain, grass, rocks, dirt, whatever. I first paint the ground brown, just so if something does show through as you're putting your landscape down, it shows through brown. And this looks like a ridiculous effort, but it was Sean's idea. He learned about it on the internet somehow about painting ties different colors. And yeah, I thought he was crazy. I said, but well, I'll give it a shot, Sean. And so we ended up painting every tie different colors. And after we did that, we go over it with a gray chalk. And it's the kind of chalk that you would use for carpentry snap lines. You can get black chalk, it actually is, for those snap lines. And it's like $2 for a big bottle of it, as opposed to really expensive pan pastels or some other uh, chalk product. And you go back over this mishmash of color with that gray, and it just blends out everything. And you get these wonderful little light variations in the colors of the ties, which doesn't show terribly well here, but it's actually um, very positive in terms of how it looks. Obviously, we rusted the rails and all the spikes as well. So this is the magic dirt. Really getting that dirt layer down. We literally went out in the backyard of Sean's house and dug up dirt and cooked it and did just a white glue down to get it into location. Pretty standard procedure there. You can really start to get a sense of what things are going to look like. Of course, in this view, you can see we've installed the trestle here. We've installed the pier, some of the cribbing that was going to be behind buildings, and some of the retaining walls that are on the layout. So next step was really the fascia. We got a little carried away early in putting some of the grass down. I would have held off on this, but Sean was just desperately wanted to see some green on the layout. So yeah, we did some of the grassy areas before we put the fascia on. And quite honestly, we should have done it after, because I use this laminate router to route the edges of the fascia to fit the terrain, and it did kind of dig gouges a little bit. The wheel that the laminate router runs on tended to gouge a little bit, but we just went back and filled it in, and everything was fine. You can also see here where we took hydrocal, broke it up into little chunks, stained it with the same color paints and whatnot that we used on the gessoed areas, and used that for the rock fall at the bottom of rock walls, the talus that is typical for these kind of conditions. This side is a trestle. You can see the hanging track here, but there'll be a big trestle in here. You'll see a little bit later on with a creek underneath it. Oh, and then there's a creek comes down off of the top of the layout. There's a waterfall, then a second waterfall down to here. So this is an in progress shot. This is not complete, but really put it in here to give you a sense of what the fascia does and how it follows the terrain. You can also see the backdrop. We were actually incredibly lucky, not a lot of forethought, but the colors in the backdrop actually matched really well with a lot of the colors in our landscape materials, and it just really you almost can't tell where the layout stops and the backdrop starts. Oh, that's the mountainside. Again, you can see the logging area, log loading area, the camp down, the logging camp down here. And then this is the ocean side. Again, you can see the fascia. There are engine facilities here. This is again the wharf and the pier down on this end. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the landscape. I'll go into trees in a minute. We used a very standard static grass application. We basically static grassed everything that wasn't going to be dirt and use that as a base. I mix three colors of static grass together to give a lot of variation in the color of the grass. And you don't really see it in the photographs, but because I don't mix those three colors together in the applicator, they come out sort of individually clumps. And so you get a little bit of brown here, a little bit of greener here, a little bit of tan over there, and it really creates a very naturalistic look in your static grass. This was a labor of love. I have to tell you, a lot of the hours that we spent on this layout were spent creating trees. Keith Wiseman gave us some kind of starter trunks that he wasn't going to use. These are cedar trunks made out of shakes. So we split the shakes. We didn't have enough, so I ended up making a lot of our own. But we take those cedar shakes, we turn them down or cut them down. I use my belt sander. I just put it on auto and set it up, and I sand those things down to a point, and then I take a razor saw, and you can kind of see it here, scribe bark texture into them. This is a set of resin trunks. I use these resin trunks on my modules, but we didn't use them on the layout, but it does show you the progression between kind of a raw trunk. I paint it black. I go over that with kind of a light gray so the black goes into the crevices and creates shadow and depth. I take my wife's, can't tell her this, but I take my wife's broom and I cut bristles that are off the bottom of it, and they make wonderful dead limbs at the bottom of the tree trunks. And then I'll show you a little bit more about this, but I use a furnace filter material, glue it to the trunk, paint it black, and then go over it with two colors of ground foam to give you this kind of look. You'll see a little bit of moss on the trunks. We had a lot of conversations about which way is north, because the moss is always on the north edge of or north side of the trunks. So this is that furnace filter material. It's called Duralast natural fiber filters. It's kind of a coarse, we think it's boar's hair or something akin to that. Cut triangles out of it, split those triangles in half, glue those to the trunk, and tease the crap out of them, excuse my language, but you can see none of these look like really sharp triangles, so we've teased the edges, really trying to get the trees or the branches, the foliage, to have a naturalistic look. The deciduous trees, Sean ran into this guy named Don Ledger. I believe he's in Arizona, and he makes these wonderful deciduous trees. I told Sean I didn't like making deciduous trees. I'm not particularly great at it. And so he reached out to Don, and we bought, I don't know, 60 or so deciduous trees. There's over 150 conifers and probably about 50 or 60 deciduous trees on this layout. Don's a funny guy. Sean had told him this is summer. We want, full summer foliage, and he sent us a bunch of fall foliage. And Sean reached out to him and said, we really can't use these. He said, send them back. I'll send you new ones. Yeah, I guess he just sits around in his armchair at night making trees, and they're not terribly expensive. They're probably more expensive than some people would like, but they're reasonably priced. This tree in the center is probably about that's 12 inches tall, I think. He does it all with rope fiber, jute fiber, and they make really wonderful trunks and texture. So bushes and landscape, there are probably I'm going to guess maybe 5 or 6 different kinds of bushes. So there's a mix of commercial bushes. And as we were starting to get into really trying to landscape the layout, we realized we could not afford uh, to buy just commercial bushes. And in fact, we really didn't like it when they were like what it looked like when we just used the commercial bushes. So we started doing this technique of using jute twine, tweezing it out, gluing the base of it, going over it with hairspray and fixing the framework and rigidly with hairspray, and then going back over it with paint. And before the paint would dry, we would sprinkle on textured foam, ground foam, static grass materials to give us a broad variety of different kinds of bushes, different colors, different shapes. It's a real cool technique, and it gives you a really wonderful kind of realistic, a lot of the bushes here that you see are that type of bush. There's over 800 of these on the layout. So that bush right there is one of those. We also use polyfoam to create kind of ivy or things growing down over the top of the rocks. And with just ground foam sprinkled on, painted brown and ground foam sprinkled on the top of it to give us that vegetative look. So you combine all that together, you end up with some pretty interesting landscapes. The water, I had been using a product by Unreal Details called Magic Water, and they went out of business, unfortunately. So we ended up going to using Woodland Scenic's Water Effects product. It is a pretty good product. It stays a little bit flexible, which on this layout, because it moves around and whatnot, is a good thing. It doesn't get extremely rigid, just hard enough to stay in place. So this is Sean going in and tweaking all the bubbles and little crevices and cracks along the perimeter of the layout, trying to get that product worked into the landscape. That takes about 2 weeks to really dry enough where you can do something else to it. So basically we cover it up, close up the garage and walk away for 2 weeks and don't do anything on the layout. We go build buildings or do something else in that time frame. Really important that you cover this up so you don't get dust and crud, on the water surface. The whole surface here is probably about 3/16 to a 1/4 inch thick is all it is. One thing that gives us the depth that we want to get is I do a graduated paint. So I'll start with really flat black out in the deeper water and gradually add brown to it until up around the water's edge. You can kind of start to see it here. It almost goes to the color of the rocks and gives you that gradated feel of going from deep water to shallow water. This is what the product that we used for the primary base for the water. And once that sets up, I go over it with this Liquitex product, and I've used this on all my modules. It's a great product. It goes on white, and you think, oh my God, I've ruined my water, but it dries crystal clear. And you can texture your water surface. A lot of this surface is dead flat. And just I use a brush and I just stipple it and play with it and tweak it around till it looks like, it's got a wavy surface or a water blown surface. And then this is it's a gloss heavy gel. It's actually, you can build up waves. So I'll build up the waves. Let's say those waves are maybe 5/16 to a 1/2 inch tall. And when that material sets, you come back, it's all crystal clear. You just dry brush it with white acrylic paint, and you've got your waveforms. Everybody thinks it's a very challenging artistic thing to do, and it's not. It's actually quite easy to do. I use that same Liquitex product to create the waterfalls. I paint the Liquitex onto a sheet of glass, and once it's cured out, you can literally peel it off the glass and glue it in place on the layout. This is sort of a view where it's partially cured. It's not fully cured out, but I wanted to get it on the layout in its before it had fully cured. It dries clear just like it does in the flat portions, and then I go back over it and I dry brush with white paint to give the the effect of falling water. I use a very tiny amount of white polyfoam at the bottom, just to give a sense of a little bit of spray effect. Less is more for that kind of thing. And then structures, I think there's 12 structures on the layout. A lot of these we've already gone over. The dock and Al's place is in memory of Al Judy, who really has been was a driving force in ON30. He's a fantastic modeler, and a driving force in ON30 modeling on the East Coast, and really has reached out his tendrils out to the West Coast to a lot of us who model in ON30. But so we got the sawmill, the dock, cabin in the woods, the Silverjack mine, all the engine facilities, the hanging rock trestle, and Camp 3 and the smithy and the log landing. I'll go over those really quick. How am I doing on time, Tom? Here, I'll continue on. This is a sawmill. This is a heavily kit bashed. I think it's a John Rendell kit. It's not totally prototypical. There's no log pond. Basically, they're rolling the logs off the cars onto the landing and then up into the mill to be cut. We just didn't have very much room, so it's representational, but it's not really truly prototypical. A lot of fun. I had a lot of fun building this. It was again, I think the only thing that came out of the kit was the back wall. And I used the materials in the kit to build the rest of it, kind of from a scratch standpoint. This is the pier. The pier is just coffee stir sticks with dowels. Trying to create realism here. I hammered down the top of the dowels so it looks like they've been piers driven into the water. You can see we did barnacles and stuff growing on the bottom, a lot of nut bolt washer castings, things like that, just to try and give some realism. This is one area where we really think we need more detail. It's okay, but it's not at the level that I would like it to be. The Silverjack mine, this is a kit. Whoops, sorry. This is a kit. I forget whose kit it is, but all the rest of this, the trestle, the dump, and the head frame is all scratch built. We didn't want to create something really elaborate. This is sort of a backwoods gypsy mine that's trying to operate and bring some silver out of the mountains. The engine house. Sean and I had an interesting collaboration on a lot of these. He built the base building and did the base painting, and then he turns it over to me and says, "Can you weather this and make it look good?" Not that he doesn't do a great job, but because he does. But I do all the weathering, and I use Bragdon powders a lot to create, streaks on the roof, just rust and dust everywhere. I take a toothpick and I do rusty nail holes on the windows, sit over the engine house doors, things like that. As far as the signs go, I print out signs on photo paper. I pull them off the internet. I make them up in Word. I do all kinds of things. And then I take that photo paper and I sand the back of it down until you basically just have the emulsion. And that creates a very thin paper-like application that you can just white glue onto the building or wherever you're applying. There's probably 100 hours of detail just in this building alone with painting all these, all the details. Almost all of our buildings are lighted. So the engine house has, full lighting inside. I try to give it as much realism as I can. That's an L. Judy building right there. We were not shy about saying, hey, would you like to build a building and put it on the layout? Al did one. Dave Meek, if you know who Dave Meek is, he built the water tank on the other side. Sean built this water tower, and I did a little bit of weathering on it, but not much. We have a combination of coal-fired locomotives and wood-fired locomotives, so we have both fuel sources here at this point. Sean printed out a jig. He's big into 3D printing, and he just printed out a jig for us to build all the tunnel portals. So you see all the tunnel portals kind of look the same because we used the same jig to build them out. That made it very easy to build the tunnel portals. This is the Camp 3. This is a smithy, 2 camp buildings. This is that Dave Meek water tower, and then a little chicken coop over here. These buildings are all lighted. And this is that hanging rock trestle that I was telling you about with the waterfalls. This was fun because I took we placed the track, and I just did a rubbing of the track radius, and I built the trestle around that rubbing. Made it very easy to figure out how to space things out and what radius it ought to be, and so on and so forth. I did not build the trestle first and try and put the track to it. It was the opposite. You can see here some of the there's commercial cattails in here and some commercial shrubs down in this area. These light green shrubs are all commercial shrubs. One thing that I do is on the rock molds, I take ground foam, I put some glue on the rock, just brush it on, and I take ground foam and hold it in the palm of my hand and just blow it onto the rocks. And you can see how it creates this kind of mossy surface, which is perfect for Pacific Northwest. This is the logging landing. This was a kit, and it was a little bit brutal to install, fun to build, but brutal to install. A lot of finicky rigging and wires. I use a upholstery thread for the rigging, which is kind of a heavy duty thread. I had to fabricate some of my own. I think some of these are Sierra West pulleys and whatnot, but I had to fabricate some of my own because I really wanted this to look prototypical. So, I had did some research, had a lot of research that I used to generate the hay rack log loading situation there. Getting towards the end here, so a lot of details, hundreds of hours in detail, thousands of little bits and pieces, and the layout just sucks up details. It's unbelievable. You think you've got enough to cover the entire layout. It covers a 2-foot square area. So, you never have enough. This is one detail exercise. I probably did something similar to this maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of the build. So, like I said, a lot of details around the buildings. This is a clothesline behind the camp. This is some of the interior detail before we glued down the engine house. The roof of the engine house actually comes off, so you can actually look down inside and see the interior. Again, little things, that kind of set you apart. like snags, old snags of a lightning struck tree with an eagle sitting in it. Um, not something that gives character, but you don't really see very often on layouts. No, we always get the question, is it portable? Sure, it's very portable. This is at one of the GTS shows. We have layout groups, modular groups that come in and spend 6 hours setting up. We were set up and running trains in about 25 minutes at this show. And we rent a U-Haul, lift it up into the back of the U-Haul, strap it down, and haul it to wherever we're going. This is, any of you know Gary Beatty, he does every year what he calls a Fiesta, and it's really a wonderful gathering of invited modelers who bring small layouts. And ours was by far the largest layout at his home. And there's probably 30, 35 micro layouts at these shows that he does. Really a lot of fun. Get a lot of Disney folks here that are very talented modelers. So this is a final look. These are shots, Mike Massey, those are shots taken for the ON30 annual this year. Just give you a sense of how the layout looks. This is the ocean side. There you can see one of the snags that we developed. This is the hanging rock trestle. I think you saw that image earlier. Camp 3 and the upper log landing loading area where the trains come up and pick up the logs. Some really nice big first growth timber here. And that's the end. A lot of people contributed to this layout, not the least of which is Sean's wife. And my wife too. They've both been extremely patient about the time spent on this layout. Like I said, about 3,000 hours. And, every Sunday I'd go over to Sean's house, get there about 6:30 in the morning and leave about 2 in the afternoon. And we would just work on the layout over a period of about 3 years. So a lot of good people involved in this effort.
How's the weather out there?
How's the weather? It's probably 85 degrees right now, sunny. It's always sunny. It's always sunny in Southern California. So anyway, I guess, Tom, open it up to questions.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably spellbound. This is a absolutely stunning model railroad. And does anybody have any questions for Keven?
Yes. Hi, Keven. That's fantastic work that you've done. What is the total weight of the layout? I'm curious.
About 240 pounds.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, we really put effort into keeping it absolutely as light as possible. That's one reason, the foam and the Bragdon products are very, very light. So
Nice. Well done.
thank you.
Kevin, this is Dan Rousseau. Any chance we could get you guys to come to Harrisburg with it? We would love to have it at Harrisburg.
Dan, Sean and I talked about it in a joking kind of way, but I'm not sure I want to drive 3,000 miles in a U-Haul.
I know.
Actually, 6,000 miles in a
Well,
U-Haul.
hey, I just retired. I'll come drive.
Make it a road trip. 4 of us will go.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah. No, great work. And I tell you, one of the things that you did that I really liked was that crazy trick with the track and the ties. I literally on my layout, I am doing hand laid track, and I went through the process of staining the ties in small batches, various colors. And so that was really interesting to see that you guys had gone and painted the ties in various colors, and then went back over it with a final
The
wash.
chalk, yeah,
Yeah, the chalk.
Hey,
No, I was shocked, Dan, at the transition. I mean, you look at that first photo and you think,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, this is a clown show." We'll have to rip it all up and take it out. And at the end of the day, it looks absolutely fantastic. Looks great.
But that's also one of those techniques, just like the other one that you used on your layout, which is, going in. It's a stage technique. The, stage set designers use this in Hollywood for years, which is the all black, right?
Mhm.
Getting that into the crevices and then bringing up, everything with highlights and the depth of field that that creates on your scenery is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it I learned to do that a long time ago with, even plaster molds and whatnot. Is just you go black first and then you bring out the lights as you develop that finish. You go lighter and lighter. You go black, black, and then you go over it with washes, and then you dry brush the highlights. I mean, literally with a light tan or something, just to bring those edges out on the molds.
Kevin, once you put the chalk on the ties, did you seal those?
No, we
No,
did
okay.
not. It has an adhesive quality in the material. It doesn't seem to need to be.
Hmm.
I mean, to some extent, Bob, I think probably there is some degree of that because when you glue down your ballast, you're
Yeah,
also,
yeah, yeah.
going over it with white glue. So I guess the answer would be yes, but it's part of the ballasting process.
And I really like the
Yeah.
way that you made those waterfalls. I mean, it's so obvious once you show it.
hey,
It's
Kevin, one
first.
question.
Yeah.
Oh, go
Let
ahead.
me
I'm
make
sorry.
one comment about the waterfalls. I was just going to say, the this first time I ever did it, I was scared out of my mind that it wasn't going to work. But it ended up being really very, very effective. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Mhm. Yeah, great idea.
Hey, Kevin, this is Phil at home. One of the things that works well on the ties is actually to use the pan pastels.
Right.
They
Yeah.
work really well to color the ties. You take about 4 or 5 colors of pan pastels and just go through tie, and then I sprayed them with a dull coat afterwards. Before I did the side rails, rusted them. Works well.
Right. No, I can see that. It's kind of the same ideas. You just want variation in the ties. You don't want them all to be the same color. So
Exactly.
especially at O scale, at O scale, it's kind of the difference between HO and O, I guess, or even the smaller scales is that the bigger things get, the more you have to pay attention to the detail because the detail is obvious, as the scale gets larger and larger.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kevin. That was just absolutely stunning. And thank you for taking the time to be on New Tracks.